Also, religion and government were linked together. We kind of saw that in Egypt as well. What that really means is the priests and priestesses had a good amount of power in ancient Rome. They were kind of put into positions of power. Now, they weren't senators, but same idea as we've talked about all year. A lot of people feared upsetting the gods. So at the same time, you don't want to upset the priests because who talks to the gods? The priests do. It's the same idea. Or priestess. And the emperor here was the head of church. The idea of a pope for the Catholic Church actually comes from Rome. Because next week when we kind of talk about the fall of Rome, Rome's going to split into two, an east and a west. And when that happens, there's going to be Eastern Emperor, but there's not going to be a Western Emperor. And the Pope is going to basically become the new Western Emperor. And even to this day, technically, the Pope is the Emperor of the Roman Empire that's left, if you will. But we call it the papacy. And over time, you're going to kind of see some emperors become more of a godlike symbol. So the people are literally going to see them as a living god here on earth. Kind of like in Egypt. Let me see if there's one more. Yeah, there is. So later they believed emperors were themselves a living god. So basically, what does that mean? Well, think of like a king or an emperor, how people are going to bow before them and do work for them. Not only because they're emperor, but they also kind of see them as like a representative of the gods. The gods have put them in that position is another way you can kind of see it. So not everyone's like, there's a living god. They see it more that the gods have chosen them to rule. And that's really how a lot of the kings and queens of Europe will be viewed too over the next 1,000 years. Not many people today see that Queen Elizabeth was handpicked by God himself to become queen. They just see that it's succession laws and this made her queen. But back when people weren't as educated as we are today, yeah, they saw it that way. Everyone good? Just raise your hand if you're still working. I don't want to change it on you if you're still working. Good. Okay. You don't need to write this down, but it's just that same list that we were kind of talking about. And it has a couple of the others. So the Greek gods compared to the Roman gods. So down here, the god of ice. We didn't talk about that. But Vulcan. The god of the underworld, Pluto. The no longer planet Pluto is Hades in Greece. So Pluto, and the reason why Pluto, the furthest, dwarf planet, it's not a planet anymore, but dwarf planet, why it's named Pluto is, being the furthest from the sun, it's basically an ice world. If we were to ever land there, we would discover a lot of ice on the surface of that moon. So yeah, it's more like a moon. And Hermes, Mercury. Minerva was Athena. Diana was Artemis, sorry. And yeah, we talked about the rest, right? Yeah. All right. Moving on to our city life. Life in the Roman cities. Anyone got questions thus far? Cool. All right. We got AM. Nathan.
What do we do?
Kona. I'm going to have you share yours. And
Okay.
Andrew.
All right, Nana, I'll do the first one, and then you can do.
Connor, I'm doing the first one.
Okay. Oh, you're the first.
Yeah.
Ready?
Yeah.
I'll do the second.
All right.
There's only
Life in Roman cities.
So I'll do the third one, I guess.
only two.
Rome had. This is all about the citizens of Rome, so like the people who live there. Rome had nearly 1 million people in there, in Rome, and Rome had citizens from all over the empire, and they put all their ideas together to make to make all the people happy. So like they would vote on stuff, and then it was a problem to have a lot of citizens because it made the city noisy with a lot of people, and it had a lot of unemployed people because not everyone can get a job if there's so many people, which made it poor, which made it dirty if people are living on the streets. And then the people had small rooms with no running water, the poor people. And it was also a problem because people hurt others by dropping trash out of their windows. It said this in the book. I don't know, it's pretty weird, but
basically they didn't have like trash collectors or like trash cans early on. So if you lived on the second story, you would just kind of throw your trash out your window. So it could hit somebody. And worse off, you could have a bucket of waste that you like throw on people, and yeah, it's gross. Rich and poor.
Poor Romans had little to eat. Typical foods were bread, oil, and fruit, but the government provided free grain to keep people happy. Nathan, you can do that.
I'll do that. Okay. Wealthy Romans lived a life of luxury in big, beautiful homes. They spent time going to dinner parties and at the theater. Some of the meals that they ate included dates, oysters, and ham. They also ate some strange dishes such as salted jellyfish, roasted parrot, and boiled flamingo tongue. And that's our presentation.
Nice job, yes, nice job. Ladies, do you want to go over the urban problems, and then I'll share both of mine? Sounds good. Okay, let's do it. All right. Going back to one thing Andrew said about what you can see actually right now. I'm gonna attach CNN 10 on the assignment I posted today after this. But right now, one thing we're seeing around the world. I don't know if Mr. Madigan's talked about this, but the level of pollution and like CO2, hey Austin, has actually dramatically dropped. So like places that are normally like really polluted, like parts of China, have clear blue skies because so many people aren't driving right now, which is pretty cool. So that being said, it's still going to become a problem once people start driving again. So that's kind of why we need to push for cleaner technology, for example. All right, let's do our responding to urban problems, and then I'll share my two things. So this was Ellie, it was Kennedy, Kylie, and Glucky. Okay. Ready, ladies?
Yep.
Here we go.
The Romans came up with solutions for the urban problems. They built sewer and plumbing systems to improve sanitation. The Romans also built aqueducts, artificial canals that carried fresh water from springs, streams, and lakes into Roman towns. The water traveled through a system of canals and pipes. Some were underground and some were supported by high bridges.
Ellie?
Okay, there we go. Oh, yeah. Public baths were an important part of city life. Most towns had public baths. Romans visited public baths to bathe and socialize.
Alright, now this sounds weird, and I'll go over that in a minute, okay? It sounds kind of weird to bathe with a bunch of people. I'll come back to that, okay? Alex?
Maximus was a large oval stadium used for chariot races, and the Colosseum was a Roman stadium where Romans watched gladiator fights, and it was named for a huge statue of a Roman emperor that once stood beside the arena.
Gladiators were trained Roman warriors in the arenas, like stadium kind of. Romans could watch gladiators fight to the death. The crowds might seem like hunters are like killing usual animals. The Romans watched combined bravery and violence to honor the cruelty.
And then that's the same thing you got. Okay. All right, cool. Nice job, ladies. Let me go back to mine. Shwimp, 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 shwimp. Okay. So, City of Rome. As the guys said before, the ladies kind of talked about the solutions to a lot of the problems that the gentleman mentioned. So, by post-Augustus, the Octavian guy we talked about after Caesar, the city of Rome reached about 1 million people living there. Today, that's not really that big of a city, but back then it was like I think besides China, the largest city in the Western world. And as Andrew was saying, whenever you have that many people in a small area, you're going to be overcrowded with poor people. There's only so many jobs. So when you have more people than jobs, you're literally going to have poor people. And remember, most people in Rome are uneducated and poor to begin with. So there's only so many jobs they could do. And another problem is many aren't going to have running water, so clean drinking water, or a good place to live. So you will have homelessness. That's always been a thing and probably always will be. But by good housing, it's like your house is like dirty, it's disgusting, there's trash outside, you don't have any clean water to drink, so you're drinking from like a Publix barrel or something that everyone's drinking out of. And not only that, but horses are probably drinking out of that same water. So you can just picture how disgusting that is. Yeah. And not having running water is still a problem today. Fresh water is something we have, and it is such a major thing to prevent disease, for example. And then we saw public bathhouses are going to start to be created to kind of help with this issue. Now, I know it sounds weird to have public baths, but it's also a totally different culture than us today. We are based off Rome, but their culture was a little more, I guess, relaxed in like the human body than ours is today. And for Rome, a good way you can kind of compare public bathhouses is, yeah, people are, I guess, taking a bath with a bunch of other people, but more importantly, think of like a pool. It was basically like a public pool. It's the best way you can kind of compare it for us today. So like most people are going to the pool to like hang out with friends, swim and have fun. More or less the same thing here for the bathhouses. Kids would probably just go and have fun, hang out. Basically you're just swimming, where adults are just socializing. But at the end of the day, it's got two purposes. Much like a swimming pool, you're getting clean. So if you're clean, if you're washing your hands, disease is going to go down. And one more thing about this you may be thinking is that water is going to get disgusting. The Romans were genius. What the ladies talked about is they created these aqueducts, which are basically stone like pipes, and they're bringing fresh water into their cities. And that water is going to make it to these pools so that the water is constantly flowing like a river. So it may collect in a pool, but that's going to eventually drain. So it's never like old, dirty water sitting there all day long. It's constantly changing. Everyone done writing? I lost my little list. Yeah, Luca, what's your question?
Could you technically drink the water out of those, like
the aqueduct?
bathing houses?
Technically you could, yeah. The water that's coming in is fresh water you could drink, though. The pool itself may be kind of gross to drink out of, maybe. But the water coming in is not dirty. So it's kind of like a pool in that regard. For us today, it just goes through the pump and it gets cleaned that way. So it kind of was doing the same thing in ancient Rome, except they just didn't have, chlorine and stuff like we do. So if you were the very first person there in the morning to that pool, you could probably drink that water and you'd be fine. I think if you showed up at 5 p.m. and people have been swimming all day and you try to drink the water, it would probably be kind of gross. But it's better than not bathing at all. It's kind of a way to think of it. All right. Everyone good? Just raise your hand if you're finishing. Okay. Here we go. Oh, there's one more. JK. And people often threw their trash to the streets. So like Andrew was saying, how some people would get hurt and stuff. Disease is probably a big problem with that. But not only that, but if you're throwing stuff out your windows, and people didn't live in houses like we do, think of like how much space is from your house to the street. Literally, if you have a second story house and maybe you're in that second story bedroom right now, the bottom of your window, like if you drop something out your window, would be the street in Rome. That's how packed it was. If you ever were to live in New York City or Chicago, it's kind of the same thing. If you were to throw something out of an apartment window, it's gonna land on the street below and hit somebody. So that's kind of what they're talking about. Any trash you'd throw out would potentially hit people and hurt them. So yeah. All right. So what are they going to do to improve it? Here's major things they're going to do. I think there's like 4 things here. 4 like bullets. So they're going to come up with many solutions. Public baths is one we just talked about. And I think that's our connects to our aqueducts here. So aqueducts are going to be built to help move water from fresh springs and fresh rivers into Roman towns. Oof. Hold. Hello, let me look. Are you kidding me? I'm triggered. I'm so triggered. I'm sorry. I want to correct that. It's bothering me. So aqueducts, vocab word too. Basically, they're big bridges that carry water like a giant water slide from the mountains to their cities. And these were so well designed that they actually still exist today. If you've ever been to Italy, or if you ever go in the city of like Rome, they still have fountains that are running today. Those fountains are supplied by Roman aqueducts. So you're talking about 1,500-year-old aqueducts that are bringing water to those fountains. And with that, the water out of those fountains you could actually drink. I don't know if they recommend you do that, but technically you could gather water from it and drink it. It's pretty cool. Bathhouses will be another thing, and it's going to be kind of like pools for us. It's a big popular thing. And when you think of Rome, Rome is in the Mediterranean, so much like Greece, it's kind of like Florida. Year round, it's pretty nice. It's almost pool season year round. So that's why bathhouses are going to be really popular. So it's kind of a place to go cool down. When it's chilly, they actually had heated bathhouses too. And how they did that was they built, imagine like a swimming pool, and underneath it they actually had fires that slaves would feed to warm up the water. And again, I know what you're thinking, why didn't the slaves just kill those people? They could have, but like we saw at Spartacus, it was going to end badly, and they would know who did it, so yeah. And then the last one is the arenas, like at the Colosseum. And arenas weren't just built in Rome. The Romans actually built arenas in every larger city. So all over Rome, no matter where you lived, you can go to a local arena and watch gladiator games. You could see exotic animals, like maybe you'd see a cheetah hunting down an animal. Maybe you would see a gladiator fighting this crazy beast that's furry with teeth and it growls and it has claws, a bear. So it could be all kinds of stuff like that. And really, for the poor people of Rome, a lot of the leaders would hold gladiatorial games or these kind of things. And at these arenas, they would give free food to people. So it was a way to keep the poor a little bit happy. So if you're starving, you're entertained and you get to eat some food while you're being entertained. So it's kind of a way to solve some of the problems, or at least distract them from how fair life is. Not all the arenas in Rome were like sacrifices of animals of people though. They also had another one called the Circus Maximus, which was OG NASCAR racing basically, where they'd race chariots. There was always a chance, like in racing today, where there could be an accident and a horse could be injured or a person, but for the most part, it was pretty safe. Yeah, Luca?
Would you have to pay to get into the arenas though?
That's a good question. I think it kind of depended, maybe. So if they had a special holiday or something, I think it would be free. Yeah, that's a good question. I'm not 100% sure on that. I'm sure at certain point they would have you buy tickets. Yeah, good question. Andrew Menard. Unmuted. There you go. Yeah.
How would they choose like who fought in the arenas?
Awesome question. So in the arenas, they would have what they would call ludus, which was basically like, let's say I was a very wealthy Roman. I would own a gladiatorial ludus, which basically is like me owning a soccer club, except I own gladiator slaves. My whole job is to train slaves to become gladiators, and I would have a champion of my house. That would be my best gladiator. Then I would have, like, think of soccer teams, any professional sports. You have like your superstars and you have your other good players. So really, my team would be pitted against, like, let's say Mr. Madigan's team, and we would pick who's fighting who, just for entertainment. Sometimes though, my really good gladiators may be fighting against prisoners. So let's say you were a former slave who tried to kill your master and you got caught. Oftentimes you'd be sentenced to death by gladiator game. So it'd be like you having to go against a really good professional athlete. You may get lucky and beat them. Probably not though, right? So same kind of idea. Good question though. All right, here's a couple pictures for you. This first one is kind of showing you how today is the bottom, and then in Rome, how aqueducts worked. So here in the mountains where there's like fresh spring water, the Romans would actually dig through mountains to, notice how it's like a giant water slide basically. They would take fresh water and bring it to their cities. Today we do the same kind of concept. If you ever go to Los Angeles has a massive aqueduct which connects to the Colorado River, and that's what feeds water to LA, because at one point they didn't have enough water for as big of a city as they were. And then they also made the Los Angeles River into like an aqueduct so it didn't flood and have issues. Another picture for you about our arenas. Okay, yeah, here's our arena stuff. So Circus Maximus, like I was just saying, is our chariot racing. Or you could just say racing. The Circus Maximus. We also had our gladiators in our Colosseum. This one's in Rome. I'll show you a picture of it. You've more than likely seen it before. Hey Morgan, what's your question?
So Brock texted me and said he wanted to tell you that like it glitched him out and he can't like join back in or something. I don't know.
Just tell him to try and rejoin.
Okay.
Thanks. Also, like we were just saying, Romans could watch gladiators fight to the death for entertainment. So in comparison today, it's like watching MMA. People will watch MMA and watch someone get beaten up until they're knocked out, which is near death, by the way. So same kind of concept. Sometimes you may have hunters killing exotic animals like lions, tigers, and bears. Oh my. And by exotic animals, they basically mean animals that aren't native to Italy. So there may be some bears in Italy, but tigers and lions aren't really a thing in Italy. Elephants aren't a thing. Maybe they get like a panda bear. It could be all kinds of stuff. And the most popular thing, though, was a one-on-one fight. So, for example, if you think of MMA, think of some of the big superstars in MMA, like McGregor. McGregor is a good example of a modern-day gladiator. A lot of people just know the name, and they may not even watch MMA, right? And that's the guy who does the arm swing thing, right? So that's a perfect example of modern day gladiators. So you watch one-on-one MMA fights where two guys or two gals fight each other. Same kind of idea. And I think that's the last one there. Yeah. It was also a way for them to teach history, tell the stories of some famous battles. So for example, our Scipio of Africanus, the video we watched last week talking about the Punic Wars, that would be an example of a battle they would have. So you might not, it wouldn't be one-on-one, but it would actually be like 20 gladiators versus 20. And they would even dress some gladiators like Romans, other gladiators like Carthaginians, and it would kind of be unfair. The Roman side would usually win. So my superstars would be the Romans, and Mr. Madigan's like bad gladiators would be the Carthaginians, and my better ones would beat them, and it would tell the story, and the crowd would go crazy, all that kind of stuff. Question, Nathan?
How much more do we have to write?
I think this is the last one right here.
Okay.
Yep. Alex, Clocky, hold on. You're still muted. Now you're unmuted.
The hunters kill them. Like, wouldn't the animals try to kill the hunters?
Oh yeah, for sure. And sometimes the hunters wouldn't win. Sometimes they would be prisoners too. So imagine if like you were arrested for like murder. You wouldn't see trial all the time. Sometimes you'd be put into the gladiator pit with maybe a sword, maybe with nothing, and like 2 lions come out and you have to fight them. Yeah. So it wasn't always hunters, but yeah. So sometimes the hunters even would be killed. Good cue. Alright, here's just some pictures. Here's some artsy pictures of the auditorium, the Colosseum today. And if you ever go to Rome, this would probably be a stop you'll go to, especially if you do like a little tour thing. Here's what they think it really looked like based off of old plans that people wrote down in Rome. They wrote things down. But this thing on top would actually be a retractable like shade. So I think they said it was made out of like cloth. And again, they would have slaves that would unroll it or roll it up. So it would give you shade at different points of the day. And then all the way around, they had statues of famous emperors, famous warriors, famous gladiators, all kinds of stuff. So really, it was just like the ancient world stadium. That's all it really was. Here's an example of the Circus Maximus. I know it's kind of hard to see maybe on your screen, but like down here, you see some lines. This is actually where our racers would begin with the chariots, and then they would race in a circle. So a circus, a circuit. That's like a root word for us. So they would race until there was a winner. And it would probably be just like today. There's like so many laps you do. And last thing about our gladiators. This is actually from the movie The Gladiator. Whenever the emperor took part in the Colosseum, he wouldn't go to the small ones, but the Colosseum was the big, great one. It was the biggest stage. The emperor would rule on whether a gladiator lives or dies, and he would actually hold out his thumb to decide their fate. So if it was a valiant fight, or maybe a prisoner, that they want to live, thumbs up means they live. And if it was someone who deserves to die, or maybe they're dying, then it would be a thumbs down. And then that person would execute the person they defeated. Yeah, exciting stuff. That's the last. Okay, cool. All right. Tomorrow, I'll give you the day off. We'll take a break. And Monday, we'll probably finish up looking at Christianity in Rome. And it's kind of the beginning of the decline of Rome. Quick questions, though. Cam, what's your question, sir?
Oh, what happened to the Circus Maximus thing? Is that like still up, or did it get destroyed?
I think Circus Maximus actually existed for really all the way until like Christopher Columbus's time. And actually in Eastern and Western Rome, it was more in East, it was like a Greek thing. There would be like crazy riots under, I think, Constantine, where a bunch of people were like killed because one team won and the other lost. But yeah, it would kind of go on for, I think more or less it would inspire like modern horse racing and car racing. Yeah.
Okay.
Luca, what's your question? Wait, there you go.
What if his thumb was like sideways? Does that mean he doesn't care if they live or die?
Yeah, if he has it sideways, he would put it out and it'd be like dramatic, and then he'd be like, and then they knew kill him. Yeah, so they would start with it sideways to be all dramatic, basically. Yeah. Menard.
What happened to the Colosseum? It looks like something like hit it or something.
Yeah, so
What
the
happened?
Colosseum today, see how it's like missing part of it and stuff?
Yes.
Really, just from like centuries of it being unused and later Italians. Rome was going to end up falling and being conquered by barbarians, like Germans and our ancestors. And they're not going to like use it or maintain it, so it's just going to fall apart over time. And that's kind of what's left of it. And today they've like restored parts of it and fixed it, though. But yeah, good question. Clocky.
There is oh, never mind. Sorry. I know.
All right, and I thought I had a picture, but I think I took it off. The inside of the auditorium, the Colosseum. I'll show you a quick shot of the inside. But the Colosseum today, at one point, I think this is the picture. It's kind of hard to tell from this angle. Here's a better one. Today, they've kind of added this stage to kind of show what it used to look like. So if you ever go to Rome, the actual floor is gone because it was made of wood. But it essentially, this is what they fought on, and there'd be like sand and dirt and all that fun stuff. And down here, if you're like, what's all that stuff? That would actually be like the cells. Like the prisoners would be held there, some of the animals would be held there. And it was so like sophisticated, they even had like elevators at certain points that would lift animals or people up to the main auditorium floor. So yeah, and then again, it's not there today, but all of this was the stands. So I think here you can kind of see the seats. This whole thing was like an arena like we have today for football or hockey or baseball or soccer or whatever. So yeah, it's pretty cool. Alrighty. That's all we have for today.